Hey there, it's Mitzi. Welcome to my channel. I am so excited to announce the Very Vintage Christmas Readathon this year. So I was thinking about Christmas time, and I was getting all excited about it. A few months ago, I was already thinking about Christmas time and what I would be reading. And I always read vintage books, of course, because two things that I love is I love Christmas time and I love old vintage books. And so why not combine the two and have a very vintage Christmas readathon? And so that's what we're going to do during the whole month of December. So this does take place from December 1st all the way to the end until New Year's, and we will be reading vintage Christmas books. So anything Christmas classics, old vintage books that have Christmas scenes, however you want to interpret this. So I pulled a few things to give you some ideas of what I'm talking about. So you could read A Christmas Carol, because this is definitely the beginning of the so-called Christmas genre. You could read a book that a lot of people read at Christmas time that's a classic, and that's Little Women, because it starts out at Christmas time. You could read 450 from Paddington. This is a vintage read. This is a beautiful copy a friend gave me just recently of this beautiful vintage book. This starts out, she's Christmas shopping at the beginning of this story, and I think it's actually Christmas Eve, so that would work. Or you could just pick up a vintage book full of poetry and read a poem or a song or something, or a short story or something like that for this readathon. So what I am thinking, pretty much is vintage Christmas. So any kind of Christmas classics, vintage books, maybe some old vintage books that you've been wanting to read, but they do not have to be vintage. So what I mean is, I want everybody to participate, and I know that many of you don't read vintage books, or it's harder to find vintage books, or you're not into reading those classics, and so that's fine. I have a board, a little game board, where I have all kinds of prompts that pertain to these vintage classics, but you can interpret them however to make them your own. So you can read a contemporary book that has some of these elements in it as well. So all I ask is that you read, either fulfill a prompt, read our group read, which I'll talk about in just a minute, or read some Christmas classic, and you have participated. I'm just encouraging reading some of those old-fashioned Christmas stories that just make Christmas so cozy and fun and memorable. And so that's why I am hosting this wonderful, very vintage Christmas readathon. I'm so excited about it. Now, I'm going to go through the prompts, but first, before I do that, I want to mention that we are going to have a group read, and for the first group read for the Very Vintage Christmas, because I may do this next year, I'm not sure, we'll see how this goes. But for this first one, we're going to read Miracle on 34th Street by Valentine, Davies. And this was published in, let me check my, I keep my laptop to try to keep up with notes that I have for you. It was first published in 1947, and by the way, this book actually won an Academy. I know that that can be kind of confusing, and they actually they don't even give this category out anymore because it was confusing, because the Academy Award, at one point when it first started, they would give away an award for the original story, the book or short story or whatever the movie was based on. And so that year that it was published, 1947, they gave an Academy Award to the Miracle on 34th Street, A Miracle on 34th Street, as the best original story. So that's just a little information you might not know about Miracle on 34th Street. Now, of course, Miracle on 34th Street has been made into many movies. There's been several adaptations of that, and I love that movie. I have one that we watch every year, and I really enjoy it, but I've never read the book, and so I thought this year I would read it. Now, I chose it for the group read, first of all, because it is super popular, so you probably can find a copy of that. And second, because it's not that long, and I know everybody's busy, and this one will not take us as long. It's a shorter book for us to read together. So I will be creating a Voxer group for this. You do not have to join the Voxer group if you're not comfortable with that app. It is a free app and it's a lot of fun to use. But if you don't want to do that, that is fine, because I will talk about it at the end of the month as well. But if you want to join the Group Read Voxer group, let me know that. And the last week in November, I will open that group up and we can start getting ready for the group read for the whole month of December. I'll talk about how we'll divide the chapters and all of that closer to that time. And I will end up putting that in the description box, but I haven't received my copy yet, so I can't tell you exactly how I'm going to divide that up. But if you are interested in the group read and you want to join the Voxer group, just email me. That's always in the description if you ever look for my email, and I will put you in that group. I'm really excited about reading that one. So that will be our group read. Now for the prompts. So I have several prompts on a little board that I made, and the prompts all go with either a novel, a short story, or a poem or something. So they're all vintage Christmas classics, of course. And so I'm going to talk about each book and why I chose each prompt. So for the first prompt is an old-fashioned Christmas. Of course, we have to have an old-fashioned Christmas prompt. So in this one, the reason I chose that was Washington Irving. I was reading some things about Christmas classics to prepare for hosting this event. And I read this. I thought this was very interesting. It says, one of Irving's most lasting contributions to American culture is in the way that Americans celebrate Christmas. In his 1812 revisions to A History of New York, he inserted a dream sequence featuring St. Nicholas soaring over treetops in a flying wagon, an invention which others dressed up as Santa Claus. In his 5 Christmas stories in the sketchbook, Irving portrayed an idealized celebration of old-fashioned Christmas customs at a quaint English manner which depicted English Christmas festivities that he experienced while staying in England, which had largely been abandoned. So these short stories contributed to reviving some of these old traditions, and they're the way that we celebrate many of our traditions in America today. So thank you to Washington Irving. And so the first prompt is an old-fashioned Christmas. And what I mean by an old-fashioned Christmas is the book has an old-fashioned Christmas element. It could be Little Women, that is an old-fashioned Christmas scene. It could be another Christmas classic like A Christmas Carol, or one of the books that you read as a child, maybe an old-fashioned Christmas story. It could be a book that just has like, I know Little House on the Prairie, that series has a couple of books with great Christmas scenes that are an old-fashioned Christmas tradition as well. Or what I love are the old-fashioned Christmas covers. And so you could use this one because it has an old-fashioned cover. Now it's not Christmas, but it is a vintage cover. You could use something like this poetry collection. That's an old vintage cover. This one I really love, How It Happened by Kate Langley Bosher. If you look close, you can see that this is holly embossed on that cover. That's an old-fashioned book. This one has an old-fashioned picture here. So any old-fashioned vintage book or old-fashioned looking cover will work for that prompt. An old-fashioned Christmas element, you see what I'm talking about. Oh, and by the way, I meant to mention this. I found those 5 stories. They are called The Short Stories by Washington Irving, in case you're interested in reading those, because that's what I plan on doing, probably either for that prompt or just to read. And they are short stories, so they won't take me long. There are 5 of those short stories, and they're in this particular collection I have called The Legend of Sleepy Hollow and Other Stories by Washington Irving. That's the cover. And the stories are, because you probably could find these online somewhere, Christmas, The Stagecoach, Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, and The Christmas Dinner. So those are the 5 Christmas short stories that I mentioned that have shaped our traditions here in America. So I do plan on reading those. Okay, so then the next prompt is A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. Of course, we all know and love A Christmas Carol, and that was published in 1843. Now for this one, I want you to read a book that has a musical element. So it could be A Christmas Carol, or it could be a book that the title, there's a lot of books that have titles, especially those cozies and things. They'll have a title that is a play on A Christmas Carol, or maybe you could read a book that has caroling involved in it. It's related to a Christmas song. It has bells on the cover. Anything that has anything to do with music, that works. Okay, so that's for A Christmas Carol. And again, you make these fit whatever you're wanting to read. The next is The Nutcracker and the Mouse King. That was published in 1816, and it was by E.T.A. Hoffman. So for The Nutcracker, I thought that this classic could be a good one for a fairy tale. So read a book that has a fairy tale element or is a Christmas sort of fairy tale. And there are a lot of books for this. Most of the Christmas picture books have a fairy tale element to them. Anything magical, fantasy, fairy tale, you see what I mean. So for The Nutcracker, a fairy tale element. Okay, on the next line, we have A Christmas Wedding. Now, I didn't know about this story. This is a short story. It says it was published in 1848, and it was written by Dostoevsky, and I'd never heard of this one. It's a Christmas tree and a wedding. Now, the story itself is not a romance, but I thought it would be a fun way to include a romance, since the title of the short story is A Christmas Tree and a Wedding. So for this one, we're going to have a Christmas wedding. So a book that has a wedding or a romance element to it. So it doesn't have to be straight out romance. It can be, but it has to have some kind of romantic element to it. Okay, so that is for A Christmas Wedding. The next square in the middle is just a vintage Christmas tree, because that is a free space. You can skip it and just count it as free, or you could read something else. And then we have gift giving. So gift giving is for The Gift of the Magi by O. Henry. I love that short story. That's always been a favorite. That was published in 1905. For this prompt, I want you to read a book that has either a gift on the cover or it centers around a special gift. Now on the bottom we have Jolly Old Saint Nick. For this one we are referring to A Visit from St. Nicholas, the famous poem by Clement C. Moore. It was published in 1823. And so for that one, we're going to just focus on Santa Claus. So if there is a Santa Claus on the cover, it can even be a Santa hat, something that refers to Santa Claus, either on the cover, maybe there's a scene where the children are waiting for Santa. However you want to interpret it, but Jolly Old Saint Nick is our prompt there. The next prompt is A Letter to Santa, and this is not a story. It's not a novel or a short story or a poem. It is an editorial. It's the editorial, Yes, Virginia, There is a Santa Claus. And that editorial was published in The Sun in 1897. I did not realize it was quite that old, but it is. It was published in 1897 in a newspaper. And the newspaper, had responded to a girl named Virginia about Santa Claus. It became famous. It was published over and over. They've made adaptations of this editorial, and that particular paper ran that editorial in their paper from 1924 to 1950 during their Christmas holiday every year. So it was a pretty popular editorial, and so I plan on reading the editorial. There's also some picture books of that as well. But for this prompt, we are going to read an epistolary novel. It doesn't have to be an epistolary. It just has to include letters or journal entries or something similar to that for that prompt. So A Letter to Santa. And I'm sure you can find some sort of epistolary or journal writing. It can even be, if you're reading something contemporary, it could even be an email. And then finally, the last one is Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. For this one, we are focusing on one of my favorite picture books, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. That was published in 1939, and it was just a little booklet that Montgomery Ward put out to give away to children during the holiday season. Montgomery Ward had always given out coloring books, and they decided that it was getting to be a little expensive and that they would save some money if they created their own book to give away. So they commissioned Mr. May to write this book, and he made just this little booklet for Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, and they gave it out that year, and it became a song and a movie, and he did go down in history. So if you know the story and the song, you'll know what I'm talking about. So I've always loved Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. We watched it when I was a child, and I always enjoyed the book too. So for this one, a movie adaptation. Any classic, any Christmas classic that you love, watch a movie adaptation and you have participated. So easy prompts. You can make them fit your books however you want to. It's flexible, and I want you to just enjoy some Christmas classics this year. So those are the prompts. Again, the group read is A Miracle on 34th Street by Valentine Davies. I'm really excited about that since I haven't read that one before. And throughout the month of December, I'm going to be sharing all sorts of vintage Christmas classics with you, and I can't wait to share them. I'm just super excited. I've been thinking about this for quite some time, and I'm really excited to do that for you. Now, I also, over the next couple of weeks, I will also be giving you my TBR for the Very Vintage Christmas Readathon, as well as some recommendations in case you're kind of stumped on a prompt or something. I will be giving some ideas for those too. So I hope you'll join me. Let me know in the comments if you plan on joining me, and let me know what is your favorite Christmas classic to read at Christmas time. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.